14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.
Good afternoon. It is Tuesday, March 19th. I'm Yumna Nofal, and these are today's headlines. President Michel Sleiman condemns a recent air raid on Lebanese territory by the Syrian army and asks the Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour to issue a letter of complaint. The Syrian opposition coalition elects Ghassan Hito as the Prime Minister of the interim government. A huge crowd gathers at the Vatican for a mass to inaugurate Pope Francis' papacy. President Michel Sleiman condemns the recent airstrike raid on Lebanese territory by the Syrian army, describing the airstrike as an unacceptable violation of Lebanon's sovereignty. Syrian jets and helicopters fired 4 rockets at targets inside Lebanon yesterday, days after Damascus warned Beirut it would attack suspected rebel sites if incursions from across the border did not cease. The air raid sparked condemnation of the international community, with the United States describing it as a significant escalation in the violations of Lebanese sovereignty. Sleiman also asked Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour to issue a letter of complaint to Syria to prevent the recurrence of such operations. Independent March 14 MPs also condemned the Syrian regime's shelling in Lebanon and hailed Sleiman's stance on the matter. They said they hope Mansour will respect the president's call to complain against the raid. General Prosecutor Judge Hatem Mahdi has ordered the arrest of 7 people suspected of involvement in attacks on 4 Sunni sheikhs in Beirut. 4 of them are suspected of involvement in Sunday's assault on Dar al-Fatwa clerics Sheikh Mazen Hariri and Sheikh Ahmed Fakhran in the areas of Khandak al-Khami. The remaining 3 are suspected of attacking 2 other sheikhs, one of them identified as Omar al-Imami. In remarks to As-Safir and Al-Jamhuriya, Mahdi promised to punish the perpetrators of the attacks. This comes as Interior Minister Marwan Sharbil told reporters that it was not enough to arrest suspects and that authorities should find out who was behind the plots. Lebanese Army General Jean Ahwajeh warns against fueling sectarian tensions, describing the recent security situation in Lebanon as the worst in 8 years. In a statement to Al-Safir newspaper, Ahwajeh said Lebanon has been through the most dangerous security conditions in 8 years. He added that politicians and religious figures should assume their own responsibilities and limit those who create strife in the country. Political and religious leaders scrambled to contain souring tensions in the country since 4 Muslim scholars were attacked in separate incidents in the Lebanese capital. Authorities, with the assistance of Hezbollah and the Amal movement, have arrested several suspects in the incidents. And investigators are saying that the attacks are still ongoing. Head of Public Secondary School Education Teachers Association, Hanna Gharib, seeks to mobilize the Lebanese people for a historic protest against the government. Once again, Gharib reiterated his call for referring the new wage scale of the public sector to Parliament for adoption. During a protest held near the Justice Ministry and Justice Palace in Beirut, he said the demonstration will be aimed at confronting strife and sectarian divisions. The protest will coincide with the cabinet session held in Baghdad Palace on Thursday to discuss ways to fund the salary raise. Sources told As-Safir Daily that if President Michel Sleiman insists on putting the controversial electoral committee at the top of the cabinet agenda, funds for the wage scale may not be approved. Syria's government is accusing rebel forces of using chemical weapons, with state media saying terrorists had fired rockets containing chemical materials in Aleppo province, killing 15 people. Terrorists fired rockets containing chemical materials on Khan al-Assal and in Aleppo province, and preliminary information suggests 15 people were killed and most of them civilians. The accusation is the first such claim by the regime of President Bashar al-Assad against rebel forces, though the international community has warned the regime against deploying its own stocks of chemical weapons. There are also concerns that the weapons could fall into the hands of militants, with the United States and Israel particularly concerned about the fate of the arms if the regime loses control over them. The Syrian opposition coalition has elected Ghassan Hito as the Prime Minister of the interim government. as part of efforts to establish a coherent and inclusive political body to administer the opposition-held areas of northern Syria. Hito, a communications executive, has lived in the United States for decades and recently moved to Turkey. 6 candidates were nominated for the position of prime minister, but after long discussions, Hito was elected as the transitional prime minister at the end of the meeting. The 2-day meeting, attended by the Syrian National Coalition's 63 key members, was expected to facilitate the opposition's efforts to appear as a capable political organization amid mounting criticisms over the internal squabbles and the fractured nature of the opposition. Pope Francis toured a crammed St. Peter's Square at the Vatican in an open white Jeep to greet a huge crowd gathered for a mass to inaugurate his papacy. Another sign of the informality that is already a mark of his papacy, Francis abandoned the bulletproof Pope-mobile frequently used by his more formal predecessor, Benedict, to tour the sprawling square in bright sunshine. Crowds had been pouring into the square and surrounding streets since before dawn. Now, Francis, who was elected by a secret conclave of cardinals last Wednesday, stopped frequently to greet the crowd and kiss babies held up to him. He got out of the vehicle at one point to bless a disabled man. Car bombs and roadside blasts have killed at least 56 people and injured 88 others in Shia districts across the Iraqi capital of Baghdad, according to police and hospital sources. Security forces stepped up searches at checkpoints after the attack, closing off key roads and worsening the capital's morning gridlock. 10 car bombs, including 2 detonated by suicide bombers, 1 roadside bomb, and 2 gun attacks, struck in and around the Iraqi capital during morning rush hour on the eve of the 10th anniversary of the U.S.-led invasion. Fighters tied to al-Qaeda have stepped up their campaign of attacks this year in an attempt to trigger sectarian tensions and undermine Prime Minister Nouri al-Maliki's government. Coming up next, former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton releases a video in which she backs marriage rights for gay Americans. Stay with us for more. Welcome back. Newly appointed Israeli Justice Minister Tzipi Livni says difficulties lie ahead for the resumption of peace talks between Israel and Palestine. Tzipi Livni, former Israeli Foreign Affairs Minister, was named by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu to be in full charge of the future peace negotiations with the Palestinians. In recent years, Palestine has been demanding Israel to halt the building of Jewish settlements in the West Bank and eastern Jerusalem and to accept the pre-1967 war ceasefire lines as a starting point for talks on borders. The Israeli government refused, and that led to the stagnation of the peace talks between the two sides. Livni believes that both sides are responsible for the difficult situation, but this all comes as EU Foreign Policy Chief Catherine Ashton meets with Palestinian Prime Minister Salam Fayyad in Brussels to sign a €7 million or $9 million US financing agreement to promote social and economical development in Palestine.
So I'm delighted that now the Prime Minister and I will sign a €7 million financing agreement precisely for this purpose. This agreement is aimed at supporting the Palestinian presence and promoting social and economic development in Area C, which we all know is of crucial importance for the economic viability of Palestine.
In a bid to deepen ties and strengthen economic bonds, India and Egypt signed 7 key pacts, including one on cybersecurity, after Prime Minister Manmohan Singh and Egyptian President Mohamed Morsi held bilateral talks in New Delhi. The two leaders also agreed to enhance cooperation in defense and in international forums like UN, expressing admiration for the courage and sacrifices of the Pope of Egypt in ushering in a new era of democracy. Mr. Singh said India had offered to share its experience as Morsi ably leads his nation in building strong institutions and frameworks for democracy, social justice, and inclusive economic development. Italy is accusing India of violating laws on diplomatic immunity by preventing its ambassador from leaving the country in an escalating row over 2 Marines who skipped bail while on trial for murder in New Delhi. Chief Justice Altamas Kabir, India's top judge, said that Italy's ambassador Daniele Mancini had forfeited his diplomatic immunity over his role in securing the release of the pair who are accused of killing 2 Indian fishermen. However, the Foreign Ministry in Rome said India was breaking diplomatic conventions by ordering the envoy to stay in the country until the next hearing in the case on April 2nd. The Marines, Massimiliano Latorre and Salvatore Girone, are accused of shooting dead 2 fishermen off India's southwest coast in February of last year, when a fishing boat sailed close to the Italian oil tanker they were guarding. Now for news around the world in brief. A bus veers off a highway and plunges 60 meters into a ravine, killing at least 13 people and 15 others injured in southwest China. State media reports the accident occurred in Baoshan city of Yunnan province in the late afternoon of yesterday. 29 people, including the driver, were on board the 30-seater bus on a tour. Preliminary investigation suggested the driver was responsible for the accident as he improperly operated the vehicle in heavy rain. A power cut strikes the tsunami-hit Fukushima nuclear plant in central Japan. Tokyo Electric Power Company said the 4 fuel storage pools at the plant had been without fresh cooling water for more than 15 hours because of the power outage. The pools are needed to prevent spontaneous nuclear reactions. The company's spokesman said engineers are trying to repair a broken switchboard that might have caused the problem. He added there was no immediate danger. And Britain's main political parties agreed to create a new system to regulate the news media, hoping to limit the spread of salacious stories. Public outrage over phone hacking, targeting celebrities, crime victims, and abducted children pushed the government to act. A new press regulator will be set up with the power to levy fines of up to £1 million and to oblige newspapers to print prominent apologies where appropriate. Prime Minister David Cameron added the Royal Charter will help deliver a new system of independent and robust press regulation in the country. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton, a potential 2016 presidential candidate, released a video in which she backs marriage rights for gay Americans. During the video for the gay rights advocacy group Human Rights Campaign, Clinton said she supports gay marriage personally and as a matter of policy and law. Earlier this month, Clinton's husband, former President Bill Clinton, also addressed the issue, saying the 1996 law that he signed defining marriage as between a man and a woman was unconstitutional and should be overturned.
LGBT Americans are our colleagues, our teachers, our soldiers, our friends, our loved ones. And they are full and equal citizens and deserve the rights of citizenship. That includes marriage. That's why I support marriage for lesbian and gay couples. I support it personally and as a matter of policy and law, embedded in a broader effort to advance equality and opportunity for LGBT Americans and all Americans. Like so many others, my personal views have been shaped over time by people I have known and loved, by my experience representing our nation on the world stage, my devotion to law and human rights, and the guiding principles of my faith. Marriage, after all, is a fundamental building block of our society, a great joy and, yes, a great responsibility. A few years ago, Bill and I celebrated as our own daughter married the love of her life, and I wish every parent that same joy. To deny the opportunity to any of our daughters and sons solely on the basis of who they are and who they love is to deny them the chance to live up to their own God-given potential. Throughout our history, as our nation has become even more dedicated to the protection of liberty and justice for all, more open to the contributions of all our citizens, it has also become stronger, more competitive, more ready for the future. It benefits every American when we continue on that path.
On that note, we end our bulletin for today. Let me remind you of the top stories. President Michel Sleiman condemns a recent air raid on Lebanese territory by the Syrian army and asks Foreign Minister Adnan Mansour to issue a letter of complaint to Syria. The Syrian opposition coalition elects Ghassan Hito as the prime minister of the interim government. A huge crowd gathers at the Vatican for a mass to inaugurate Pope Francis' papacy. Those are your Tuesday headlines live on Future Television. You can now rewatch all our bulletins on www.futuretvnetwork.com. Until then, that's all for me here. See you again tomorrow at the same time.
14 أذار حتى نحقق الحرية التي ننشدها جميعا.